Sarah Martinez stood at the edge of the crowded auditorium, watching hundreds of law enforcement officers fill the seats. The annual Police Excellence Award ceremony was always a grand affair, but this year felt different. She adjusted her crisp uniform jacket, the weight of her many service ribbons and commendations feeling heavier than usual. After 15 years of dedicated service, she had earned every single one of those honors through blood, sweat, and countless sleepless nights. The buzz of conversation filled the air as officers from different precincts reunited with old friends and colleagues. Sarah recognized many faces in the crowd, people she had trained, worked alongside, and even saved during dangerous operations. Yet despite being surrounded by familiar faces, she felt an uncomfortable tension in the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats," announced the Master of Ceremonies. "We're about to begin the recognition portion of our program." Sarah had been invited to receive the Distinguished Service Medal, the highest honor her department could bestow. It was recognition for her groundbreaking work in developing the department's new training protocols and safety procedures. What many people in that room didn't know was that Sarah had single-handedly designed the entire training program that had revolutionized how their department operated. 3 years earlier, when budget cuts threatened to eliminate crucial training programs, Sarah had stepped forward with a comprehensive solution. Working nights and weekends, she had created detailed curricula, safety protocols, and evaluation systems that not only saved money but dramatically improved officer performance and public safety outcomes. As the ceremony began, Sarah noticed whispers and sideways glances from a group of senior officers sitting near the front. Detective Raymond Foster, a 20-year veteran known for his old-school approaches, was gesturing animatedly to his companions. Sarah had worked with Foster before and knew he held traditional views about women in law enforcement. "Our next honoree has shown exceptional dedication to improving our department's training standards," the announcer continued. "Please welcome Officer Sarah Martinez." As Sarah walked toward the stage, she heard Foster's voice carry across the quiet auditorium, "I don't know why they're making such a big deal about some woman who probably just followed orders." The comment hit Sarah like a physical blow, but she maintained her composure and continued walking. She had faced skepticism and discrimination throughout her career, but it never got easier. The irony wasn't lost on her. Foster and his colleagues had all benefited from her training program, yet they questioned her qualifications. Captain Williams, a fair-minded leader who had always supported Sarah's work, stepped forward to present the award. "Officer Martinez," he began, "your innovative training program has reduced officer injuries by 40% and improved community relations scores across all precincts." The applause was polite but noticeably subdued from certain sections of the audience. Sarah accepted the medal graciously, but she could feel the weight of disapproving stares from Foster's group. After the ceremony, during the reception, the tension that had been simmering finally boiled over. Sarah was standing near the refreshment table when Foster approached with several other officers. "Congratulations on your little award," Foster said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Must be nice to get recognition for paperwork while the rest of us do real police work." Officer Janet Rhodes, one of Foster's longtime allies, stepped closer. "We've been talking, Martinez, and we think it's time someone reviewed your qualifications. Some of us aren't convinced you earned those ribbons and commendations honestly." Sarah felt her heart rate increase, but years of training kept her voice steady. "I'm not sure what you're implying, but every honor I've received has been earned through legitimate service." "That's what we'd like to verify," Foster replied. "We're requesting a formal review of your service record and the circumstances surrounding your recent promotions and awards." The group around them had grown larger, with officers from various precincts listening intently. Sarah realized this wasn't just a casual confrontation, it was a calculated attempt to publicly question her credibility and achievements. "We think someone's been getting special treatment," added Sergeant Mark Thompson, another member of Foster's inner circle. "And we're going to prove it." Captain Williams, who had been across the room, noticed the commotion and quickly approached. "Is there a problem here?" Foster straightened his posture, clearly prepared for this moment. "Captain, we're exercising our right to request a formal review of Officer Martinez's service record. We have concerns about the legitimacy of her awards and recent recognition." The room fell silent. Sarah felt hundreds of eyes on her, waiting to see how she would respond to this public challenge. She knew that how she handled this moment would define not just her own career, but potentially the careers of other women who might face similar challenges in the future. "I welcome any review of my service record," Sarah said clearly, her voice carrying across the now silent reception area. "I have nothing to hide." Captain Williams looked troubled but nodded. "If that's what you want, Detective Foster, I'll arrange for a formal review board. But I want to remind everyone that Officer Martinez has served this department with distinction." As the crowd began to disperse, Sarah felt a mix of anger, hurt, and determination. She had worked harder than most of her colleagues, made significant contributions to their department's success, and earned every recognition through merit. Yet here she was, being publicly questioned by people who didn't even know the full extent of her contributions. Later that evening, Sarah sat in her small apartment, still wearing her dress uniform. The Distinguished Service Medal lay on her kitchen table, its golden surface reflecting the overhead light. She picked up the medal and examined it closely, thinking about all the late nights and weekends she had spent developing the training program that had made their entire department more effective and safer. She thought about the irony of the situation. Foster and his colleagues were questioning her qualifications while benefiting daily from systems and procedures she had created. They used equipment she had recommended, followed protocols she had written, and worked in an environment made safer by her innovations. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from Captain Williams. "Don't let them get to you. You've earned everything through hard work and dedication. The review will prove that." But Sarah knew the review would be about more than just her individual achievements. It would be about whether the department would stand behind officers who challenged the status quo and brought innovative thinking to traditional law enforcement practices. As she prepared for bed, Sarah made a decision. She wouldn't just defend her record, she would use this review as an opportunity to show exactly what she had contributed to their department. Foster and his allies wanted to question her qualifications? Fine. She would give them a comprehensive demonstration of her value to the organization. The next morning, Sarah arrived at work early and immediately began organizing her files. She had kept detailed records of every project, every innovation, and every contribution she had made to the department. If they wanted a review, she would provide them with documentation that would leave no doubt about her qualifications and achievements. Detective Foster had unknowingly started a process that would reveal far more than he had bargained for. Sarah's contributions to the department went far beyond what most people realized, and a formal review would bring all of that work into the light. As Sarah organized her documentation, she couldn't help but smile slightly. Foster and his colleagues thought they were challenging a woman who had received special treatment. They were about to discover they had challenged the architect of the very systems that kept them safe and effective in their daily work. The review board would be convened within a week, and Sarah intended to be ready with every detail of her service record. She had nothing to fear from scrutiny because her work spoke for itself. In fact, she was beginning to look forward to the opportunity to show her colleagues exactly what she had accomplished. The irony of the situation was becoming clearer by the hour. The very people questioning her qualifications were about to learn that she was the reason their department had become a model for other law enforcement agencies across the state. Her training program, safety protocols, and innovative approaches had put their department on the map as a leader in modern policing. Sarah spent the rest of the day pulling together files, reports, and documentation that would tell the complete story of her contributions. She had a week to prepare for the most important presentation of her career, and she intended to make the most of it. Little did Foster and his allies know that their attempt to diminish her achievements would actually showcase the full extent of her impact on their organization. They had tried to take her badges, not realizing she had designed the entire program that made those badges meaningful. The review board convened exactly 1 week after the confrontation at the awards ceremony. The conference room at police headquarters had been transformed into a formal hearing space, with a long table for the 3-member review panel and chairs arranged for witnesses and observers. Detective Foster sat confidently with his supporters, convinced that this investigation would expose what he believed to be undeserved favoritism. Sarah entered the room carrying a large box of files and her laptop computer. She had spent every free moment of the past week organizing evidence that would tell the complete story of her service. Captain Williams gave her an encouraging nod as she took her seat at the witness table. Lieutenant Colonel James Morrison, a respected veteran from Internal Affairs, chaired the review board. Alongside him sat Commander Patricia Lee from the Training Division and Deputy Chief Robert Chen, known for his fairness and attention to detail. Morrison called the session to order and outlined the purpose of the review. We're here to conduct a thorough examination of Officer Sarah Martinez's service record following formal complaints questioning the legitimacy of her awards and commendations, Morrison announced. This review will be comprehensive and fair to all parties involved. Detective Foster was the first to present his case. He stood confidently and addressed the panel with the authority of his 20 years of experience. Honorable board members, Foster began, we're not here out of spite or jealousy. We're here because we believe in the integrity of our awards system. Officer Martinez has received rapid promotions and numerous commendations in a relatively short period. We question whether these honors were earned through merit or through other factors. Foster gestured toward his supporters. Several experienced officers share these concerns. We've seen good officers work for decades without receiving the recognition that Officer Martinez has accumulated in just a few years. Officer Rhodes stood next to add her perspective. We're not saying Officer Martinez is a bad officer, but we think someone needs to look carefully at how these awards were granted. The circumstances seem unusual. Sergeant Thompson concluded their presentation with what he considered their strongest argument. We believe this review will show that proper procedures weren't followed and that Officer Martinez's contributions have been overstated. When they finished, Morrison turned to Sarah. Officer Martinez, you now have the opportunity to respond to these allegations and present your case. Sarah stood and walked to the front of the room, her bearing professional and confident despite the stress of the situation. She had prepared extensively for this moment and knew exactly how she wanted to proceed. Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Morrison. I welcome this review because it gives me the chance to present the complete picture of my service to this department. Sarah opened her laptop and connected it to the room's display system. I'd like to walk the board through my contributions in chronological order, with full documentation. The first document appeared on the screen, Sarah's original personnel file from 15 years earlier. I joined this department as a patrol officer in 2010. My early evaluations show consistent high performance in all areas, with particular strengths in problem solving and community relations. Sarah clicked to the next slide, showing crime statistics from her first assignment. During my first year patrolling the downtown district, reported crimes in my sector decreased by 18%. This wasn't luck, it was the result of a systematic approach to community policing that I developed and implemented. Detective Foster shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He remembered the improvements in the downtown district but had never connected them to Sarah's work. In 2012, I identified a pattern of domestic violence cases that weren't being properly tracked across shift changes, Sarah continued. I developed a new reporting protocol that improved case continuity and led to a 35% increase in successful prosecutions. Commander Lee leaned forward with interest. Do you have documentation of this protocol? Sarah clicked to display the detailed report she had submitted. Here's the complete protocol, along with implementation data and outcome statistics. Captain Williams approved the department-wide adoption of this system in early 2013. The presentation continued with methodical precision. Sarah documented every innovation, every improvement, and every contribution she had made to the department's operations. With each slide, the scope of her impact became clearer. In 2015, I was assigned to investigate a series of equipment failures that were putting officers at risk, Sarah explained. My analysis revealed design flaws in our body armor procurement process. I developed new testing standards and vendor evaluation criteria that have prevented equipment failures for the past 8 years. Deputy Chief Chen made notes as Sarah spoke. What kind of savings did these improvements generate? Sarah displayed a financial analysis. The new procurement standards have saved the department approximately $200,000 annually while improving officer safety. Here's the complete cost-benefit analysis. As the presentation progressed, Foster's confidence began to waver. He had come expecting to expose favoritism, but instead he was witnessing a comprehensive demonstration of exceptional police work. Sarah reached the most significant part of her presentation, the training program that had earned her the Distinguished Service Medal. In 2018, budget cuts threatened to eliminate our advanced training programs. Rather than accept reduced training standards, I proposed developing a comprehensive in-house program. The screen filled with organizational charts, curriculum outlines, and training modules. I spent 8 months developing this program, working evenings and weekends to create materials that would meet or exceed the standards of expensive external training companies. Captain Williams stood to address the board. I supervised this project personally. Officer Martinez created training materials that were so comprehensive and effective that 3 neighboring departments have adopted our program. Sarah nodded and clicked to display testimonial letters from other departments. Here are formal commendations from the State Training Board and neighboring agencies. Our program has become a model for law enforcement training throughout the region. The documentation was overwhelming. Sarah had created detailed lesson plans, safety protocols, evaluation systems, and outcome measurements. The program had reduced officer injuries, improved arrest procedures, and enhanced community relations across all precincts. The training program has graduated over 400 officers in the past 5 years, Sarah explained. Graduates show 40% fewer injuries, 30% better performance evaluations, and significantly improved community relations scores. Foster realized with growing alarm that he had been using Sarah's training materials for years without knowing she had created them. Every safety protocol he followed, every procedure he relied on, had been developed by the woman he was trying to discredit. Sarah's presentation moved to her recent innovations. Last year, I developed a new approach to evidence processing that reduced backlog by 60%. I also created a community outreach program that improved public trust scores in all our precincts. The evidence was comprehensive and undeniable. Sarah had documented every aspect of her contributions with meticulous detail. Performance statistics, cost savings, safety improvements, and innovation after innovation demonstrated her exceptional value to the department. Commander Lee asked the question that was on everyone's mind. Officer Martinez, why haven't these contributions been more widely known throughout the department? Sarah smiled slightly. I've always believed that good work should speak for itself. I didn't seek recognition, I sought results. My focus was on making our department more effective and keeping my colleagues safe. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison studied the documentation carefully. This is quite extensive. Do you have verification for all of these claims? Sarah gestured toward her box of files. I have supporting documentation for every project, every innovation, and every result I've presented. Performance data, supervisor evaluations, cost analyses, and outcome measurements, everything is documented and verifiable. The board called a recess to review the materials Sarah had presented. During the break, the mood in the room had shifted dramatically. What had begun as an investigation into possible favoritism had become a showcase of exceptional police work. Foster huddled with his supporters, clearly shaken by what he had witnessed. I had no idea she was behind all those programs, he admitted quietly. Officer Rhodes looked equally stunned. The training program we all use, she created that? Sergeant Thompson shook his head in disbelief. We've been questioning the qualifications of someone who basically designed half of our operating procedures. When the session reconvened, Morrison addressed Sarah with obvious respect. Officer Martinez, your presentation has been quite impressive. However, we need to verify these claims through independent sources before reaching our conclusions. Sarah nodded confidently. I understand completely. I encourage the board to speak with anyone who has worked with me on these projects. The results are verifiable through multiple sources. Morrison announced that the board would spend the next week interviewing supervisors, reviewing departmental records, and verifying Sarah's claims through independent documentation. The formal review would conclude with a final hearing where the board would present its findings. As the session ended, Sarah felt confident but emotionally drained. She had presented her case as thoroughly as possible, but now the decision was out of her hands. She packed her materials and prepared to face another week of uncertainty. Foster approached her as she was leaving. "Martinez, I owe you an apology. I had no idea about the scope of your contributions." Sarah looked at him steadily. "Detective Foster, I hope this process helps all of us understand that merit comes in many forms. My goal has always been to serve this department to the best of my ability." The investigation was far from over, but the first phase had revealed something Foster and his allies had never expected. Instead of exposing favoritism, they had uncovered the full extent of Sarah's remarkable contributions to their department. The woman they had tried to discredit was actually the architect of the systems that made their jobs safer and more effective. The week following Sarah's presentation was filled with intense investigation as the review board worked to verify every claim she had made. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison and his team interviewed dozens of officers, supervisors, and external contacts to build a complete picture of Sarah's contributions to the department. Captain Williams was among the first to be interviewed. He sat across from the three-member panel in the same conference room where Sarah had presented her case, ready to provide detailed testimony about her work. "Captain Williams," Morrison began, "we need your perspective on Officer Martinez's claims regarding the training program she developed. Can you verify the scope and impact of her contributions?" Williams leaned forward, his expression serious. "Gentlemen, and Commander Lee, I supervised that project from beginning to end. What Officer Martinez presented to you was actually an understatement of her contributions. She didn't just develop a training program, she revolutionized how we approach officer education and safety." Commander Lee took notes as Williams continued. "When budget cuts threatened our training capabilities in 2018, we were facing a crisis. External training companies were charging fees we couldn't afford, and our existing programs were outdated. Officer Martinez came to me with a proposal that seemed almost too good to be true." Williams pulled out a file folder containing the original project documentation. "She promised to develop a comprehensive training program that would exceed external standards while saving money. I was skeptical initially, but her track record of innovation convinced me to approve the project." "What was your level of involvement in the development process?" Deputy Chief Chen asked. "I met with Officer Martinez weekly to review progress," Williams replied. "I watched her work nights and weekends, researching best practices, consulting with experts, and developing materials from scratch. She created everything: curriculum guides, practical exercises, evaluation systems, and safety protocols." Morrison examined the documentation Williams had brought. "These materials are quite extensive. Are you saying Officer Martinez created all of this herself?" "Every single page," Williams confirmed. "She consulted with subject matter experts and incorporated feedback from experienced officers, but the design and development work was entirely hers. I've never seen such dedication to a project." The board spent 2 hours with Captain Williams, who provided detailed testimony about not only the training program but also Sarah's other innovations. He confirmed her work on evidence processing improvements, community outreach programs, and equipment procurement standards. Their next interview was with Sergeant Maria Gonzalez, who had worked closely with Sarah on the domestic violence reporting protocol in 2012. Gonzalez entered the conference room with her own collection of files and documentation. "Sergeant Gonzalez," Morrison said, "we're investigating Officer Martinez's claim that she developed new protocols for domestic violence case tracking. Can you tell us about your experience working with her on this project?" Gonzalez smiled warmly. "Working with Sarah Martinez was one of the highlights of my career. She identified a problem that none of us had recognized: domestic violence cases were falling through the cracks when they crossed shift boundaries." Commander Lee looked interested. "How did she identify this pattern?" Sarah noticed that successful prosecution rates varied significantly depending on which shifts handled different phases of domestic violence cases, Gonzalez explained. She spent weeks analyzing case files and interviewing prosecutors to understand why some cases succeeded while others failed. Gonzalez opened her file and showed the board the original analysis Sarah had conducted. Here's her initial report. She documented how information gaps between shifts were undermining case development and victim safety. Deputy Chief Chen studied the analysis. This is quite sophisticated work. Did Officer Martinez have specialized training in data analysis? Not formal training, Gonzalez replied. But Sarah has always had an exceptional ability to see patterns and connections that others miss. She taught herself the analytical techniques she needed to solve problems. The board learned that Sarah's domestic violence protocol had become the standard for their department and had been adopted by several other agencies. Gonzalez provided documentation showing a 35% improvement in successful prosecutions after the protocol was implemented. The most impressive thing about working with Sarah, Gonzalez concluded, was her focus on results rather than recognition. She never sought credit for her innovations, she just wanted to help victims and improve our effectiveness. The interviews continued throughout the week. Officer Thomas Kim testified about Sarah's equipment procurement improvements, describing how her analysis had prevented potentially deadly body armor failures. Detective Lisa Park discussed Sarah's community outreach programs and their impact on public trust. One of the most revealing interviews was with Chief Patricia Summers from the neighboring Westfield Police Department. Summers had requested to testify after learning about the review, wanting to provide her perspective on Sarah's training program. Chief Summers, Morrison said, "Thank you for taking time to speak with us. We understand your department has experience with Officer Martinez's training program." Summers nodded emphatically. Officer Martinez's training program is the reason our department has achieved significant improvements in officer performance and community relations. We adopted her curriculum 2 years ago, and the results have been remarkable. Commander Lee leaned forward with interest. "Can you quantify those improvements?" "Absolutely," Summers replied, consulting her notes. Since implementing Officer Martinez's training program, our officer injury rates have decreased by 45%, community complaint rates have dropped by 30%, and our officers consistently score higher on state certification exams. Deputy Chief Chen asked about the quality of the training materials. "How do they compare to commercial programs you've used?" "There's no comparison," Summers said firmly. "Commercial programs are generic and outdated. Officer Martinez's curriculum is current, practical, and specifically designed for real-world law enforcement challenges. Our training officers consider it the gold standard." Summers provided documentation showing that 3 additional departments had adopted Sarah's program after seeing Westfield's results. "Officer Martinez has probably done more to improve law enforcement training in our region than anyone in the past decade," she concluded. The board also interviewed officers who had questioned Sarah's qualifications. Detective Foster's interview was particularly revealing, as he gradually realized the full extent of what he had challenged. "Detective Foster," Morrison said, "you initiated this review by questioning Officer Martinez's qualifications. After our investigation, do you maintain those concerns?" Foster shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Lieutenant Colonel, I have to admit that I was completely wrong. I questioned Officer Martinez without understanding the scope of her contributions to our department." "Can you elaborate on that?" Commander Lee asked. Foster took a deep breath before continuing. "I've been using training materials and following protocols that Officer Martinez created, without knowing she was the author. The equipment I rely on was procured using standards she developed. Even the shift scheduling system I follow incorporates improvements she designed." Morrison studied Foster's expression carefully. "What led you to question her qualifications initially?" "Honestly? I saw a female officer receiving rapid recognition and made assumptions based on outdated thinking," Foster admitted. "I thought she was getting special treatment because I couldn't believe someone could accomplish so much through merit alone. I was wrong, and I owe her a sincere apology." The board spent considerable time reviewing departmental records to verify the claims made during interviews. They examined performance statistics, financial records, implementation timelines, and outcome measurements. Every aspect of Sarah's work was documented and verifiable through multiple sources. Commander Lee discovered that Sarah's innovations had saved the department over $1 million in the past 5 years while dramatically improving performance across all measurable categories. Her training program alone had reduced liability insurance costs by eliminating officer injuries and improving community relations. By the end of the week, the review board had compiled a comprehensive report that exceeded their initial scope. They had set out to investigate allegations of favoritism but, instead had documented one of the most impressive records of innovation and service in the department's history. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison called Sarah to schedule the final hearing. "Officer Martinez, we'll be presenting our findings tomorrow afternoon. I want you to know that this investigation has been quite revealing." Sarah felt nervous anticipation as she prepared for the final session. She had confidence in her record, but the stress of the past 2 weeks had taken its toll. Tomorrow would determine not just her immediate future, but potentially the trajectory of her entire career. The night before the final hearing, Sarah received an unexpected phone call from Detective Foster. "Martinez, this is Ray Foster. I know we haven't always seen eye to eye, but I wanted to call before tomorrow's hearing." Sarah was surprised by the call. "What can I do for you, Detective Foster?" "I want to apologize," Foster said, his voice sincere. "I questioned your qualifications based on prejudice and ignorance. This investigation has shown me that you're probably the most valuable officer in our department. I was completely wrong, and I'm sorry." Sarah appreciated the gesture, though the emotional toll of the past weeks couldn't be erased by a single phone call. "Thank you for calling, Detective Foster. I hope this process has been educational for all of us." As Sarah prepared for bed, she reflected on the strange turn of events. What had begun as an attack on her credibility had become a comprehensive showcase of her contributions to the department. Tomorrow's hearing would reveal whether the review board's findings would vindicate her work or whether politics and prejudice would somehow prevail. The truth had been revealed through painstaking investigation, but Sarah knew that truth and justice didn't always align in institutional settings. She would face tomorrow's hearing with confidence in her record and hope that merit would be properly recognized. The final hearing drew a much larger crowd than the initial session. Word had spread throughout the department about the scope of the investigation, and officers from all divisions wanted to hear the review board's conclusions. The same conference room that had hosted the original confrontation now buzzed with anticipation as Lieutenant Colonel Morrison prepared to present the board's findings. Sarah entered the room to find a dramatically different atmosphere than 2 weeks earlier. Instead of the skeptical looks and hostile whispers she had faced before, she noticed respectful nods and encouraging smiles from colleagues who had learned about her contributions through the investigation process. Detective Foster sat in the front row with his original supporters, but their demeanor had changed completely. They appeared subdued and somewhat embarrassed, clearly aware that their challenge had backfired spectacularly. Captain Williams gave Sarah a confident thumbs up as she took her seat. Behind him sat Chief Patricia Summers from Westfield, who had returned to witness the conclusion of the review. Several other department heads and training officials had also attended, drawn by reports of the remarkable findings. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison called the session to order and began his presentation with unusual formality. "Ladies and gentlemen, this review board was convened to investigate allegations regarding Officer Sarah Martinez's service record and the legitimacy of her awards and commendations." The room fell silent as Morrison continued. "Over the past 2 weeks, we have conducted the most comprehensive review of an officer's service record in this department's history. We interviewed 37 witnesses, examined thousands of pages of documentation, and verified claims through multiple independent sources." Commander Lee stood to address the crowd. "What we discovered exceeded all expectations. This investigation has revealed contributions to our department that were far more extensive than anyone realized." Deputy Chief Chen activated the room's display system, showing a summary of the board's findings. "Officer Martinez's innovations have transformed this department's operations in fundamental ways. Her contributions span training, safety, community relations, evidence processing, equipment procurement, and administrative efficiency. Morrison walked through the findings methodically. The training program Officer Martinez developed has become the regional standard for law enforcement education. It has reduced officer injuries by 40%, improved performance evaluations by 30%, and saved our department over $400,000 annually. The audience listened intently as the full scope of Sarah's contributions was revealed. Many officers learned for the first time that procedures they used daily had been created by the colleague they thought they knew. Officer Martinez's domestic violence reporting protocol improved case prosecution rates by 35% and has been adopted by 6 neighboring departments, Commander Lee continued. Her equipment procurement standards have prevented potentially fatal equipment failures while saving over $200,000 in unnecessary purchases. The presentation continued with detailed analysis of Sarah's community outreach programs, evidence processing improvements, and administrative innovations. Each project was documented with performance data, cost savings, and measurable outcomes. Deputy Chief Chin displayed testimonials from other departments and law enforcement agencies. Officer Martinez's work has influenced law enforcement practices throughout our region. The State Police Training Board has requested permission to incorporate her materials into their standard curriculum. Morrison reached the most significant conclusion. This review board finds that Officer Martinez's service record represents one of the most distinguished careers in our department's history. Every award, commendation, and promotion she has received was not only earned through legitimate merit but was actually insufficient recognition for her contributions. The room erupted in spontaneous applause. Sarah felt tears welling up as the stress and uncertainty of the past weeks finally began to dissipate. The vindication was more complete than she had dared to hope. Commander Lee addressed the original allegations directly. The claims that Officer Martinez received special treatment or undeserved recognition are not only unfounded but represent a fundamental misunderstanding of her value to this organization. Morrison turned toward Detective Foster and his supporters. This review board strongly condemns the baseless allegations that initiated this investigation. The officers who questioned Officer Martinez's qualifications did so without proper knowledge of her contributions and demonstrated a disturbing willingness to undermine a colleague's reputation without justification. Foster stood to address the board, his face red with embarrassment. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison, I formally apologize to Officer Martinez and this department for my unfounded accusations. This investigation has shown me that I was completely wrong about Officer Martinez's qualifications and contributions. Officer Rhodes and Sergeant Thompson also stood to offer their apologies, clearly shaken by the comprehensive refutation of their assumptions. Morrison wasn't finished with his presentation. This review board makes the following recommendations to department leadership. First, Officer Martinez should receive immediate promotion to Detective Sergeant, with responsibility for training and innovation development. The audience applauded again as Sarah tried to process this unexpected recommendation. She had hoped simply to clear her name, not to receive additional recognition. Second, Commander Lee continued, the department should establish the Martinez Training Academy, officially recognizing Officer Martinez's contributions to law enforcement education and ensuring her innovations continue to benefit future officers. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of the recognition being offered. Having a training facility named in her honor was beyond anything she had imagined possible. Deputy Chief Chen announced the final recommendation. Third, Officer Martinez should receive the department's highest honor, the Medal of Valor, for her exceptional service and innovation. Her contributions have saved lives, improved community relations, and enhanced the reputation of law enforcement in our region. Captain Williams stood to address the room. I am proud to announce that all of these recommendations have been approved by the Chief of Police and the City Administration. Effective immediately, Detective Sergeant Sarah Martinez will lead our newly established Training and Innovation Division. The applause was thunderous. Sarah's colleagues, many of whom had learned about her contributions for the first time through this investigation, rose to give her a standing ovation. Morrison concluded the formal presentation with a broader message about the importance of recognizing merit and innovation in law enforcement. This investigation has reminded us all that excellence comes in many forms. We must be careful not to let prejudice or assumptions blind us to the contributions of dedicated officers. After the formal session ended, the reception that followed was markedly different from the hostile atmosphere at the awards ceremony 2 weeks earlier. Officers approached Sarah to congratulate her and express their appreciation for innovations they had been using without knowing their origin. Chief Summers from Westfield approached Sarah with an offer. "Detective Sergeant Martinez, I'd like to propose a formal partnership between our departments. Your training program has been so successful that we'd like to help you expand it to other agencies." Several other department heads made similar offers, recognizing the value of Sarah's innovations and wanting to benefit from her expertise. Detective Foster approached Sarah near the end of the reception, clearly struggling with his emotions. "Martinez, I don't know how to adequately apologize for what I put you through. I let prejudice cloud my judgment and nearly damaged the career of the most valuable officer in our department." Sarah looked at him thoughtfully before responding. "Detective Foster, I appreciate your apology. I hope this experience helps all of us recognize that merit isn't always obvious and that we need to support each other rather than tear each other down." Foster nodded gratefully. "I've learned more in the past 2 weeks than I had in years. Thank you for handling this situation with such professionalism." As the evening concluded, Sarah reflected on the extraordinary turn of events. What had begun as a devastating attack on her credibility had become the most comprehensive recognition of her career. The attempt to take her badges had instead revealed that she had designed the entire system that made those badges meaningful. Captain Williams approached her as she prepared to leave. "Sarah, I have one more surprise for you. The mayor wants to present your Medal of Valor at a special city council meeting next week. Your story has inspired people throughout the community." Sarah smiled as she looked around the room at her colleagues, many of whom were still discussing the revelations from the review board's findings. "Captain, I never sought recognition for my work. I just wanted to serve the community and support my fellow officers." "That's exactly why you deserve recognition," Williams replied. "True excellence often goes unnoticed because it focuses on results rather than credit. This investigation has made sure your contributions won't be overlooked anymore." As Sarah drove home that evening, she thought about the lessons learned through this difficult experience. The attempt to question her qualifications had ultimately showcased the full extent of her value to the department and the law enforcement community. She had faced discrimination and unfounded accusations with dignity and professionalism, allowing her work to speak for itself rather than responding with anger or defensiveness. The investigation had not only vindicated her record but had also educated her colleagues about the importance of recognizing merit in all its forms. The newly established Martinez Training Academy would ensure that her innovations continued to benefit law enforcement officers throughout the region. Future officers would benefit from training materials and safety protocols that had been tested and proven effective through years of practical application. Most importantly, Sarah's experience had demonstrated that excellence and innovation could overcome prejudice and discrimination when institutions were committed to fairness and truth. The review board's thorough investigation had ensured that merit was properly recognized and that baseless accusations were firmly rejected. As Detective Sergeant Martinez prepared for her new responsibilities, she looked forward to continuing her work of improving law enforcement through innovation and excellence. The attempt to diminish her achievements had instead elevated her to a position where she could have even greater impact on the profession she loved. The story that had begun with colleagues trying to take her badges had ended with the establishment of a training academy in her honor and recognition as one of the most valuable officers in the department's history. Justice had prevailed, merit had been recognized, and Sarah's true contributions to law enforcement had finally been fully revealed.